"You saved my life. Now you must be my husband." The Apache widow told the rancher. Samuel McAllister was a man who lived a quiet life on his ranch in the wide, sun-baked lands of Arizona. His days were usually spent tending to his cattle, repairing fences, or riding across the open plains to check on the distant corners of his property. He liked the peace and the calm of life alone, away from the noise of towns or people he didn't know. The land gave him freedom, and he had grown used to the rhythm of solitude. But on one hot afternoon, that quiet life was about to change in a way he could never have imagined. Samuel rode his horse, Dusty, along a narrow canyon path. The rocks around him were tall and jagged, casting long shadows over the dusty trail. He was inspecting a new fence line when he heard something unusual, a sharp cry, followed by the sound of a struggle. At first, he thought it might be an animal, maybe a coyote or a mountain lion, but the sound was too human, too desperate to be anything else. "Hello?" he called out, his voice echoing off the canyon walls. "Is someone there?" There was no reply, only the sound of quick footsteps and a low groan. Samuel urged Dusty forward, carefully following the noises through the rocky path. Then, around a bend, he saw her. She was crouched behind a boulder, her dark hair tangled, her clothing torn. Two men were advancing toward her, their intentions clear in the threatening way they held their weapons. Samuel's heart pounded, not with fear for himself, but with concern for the woman. He had never met her, yet something about her desperation made him act. Without a second thought, he urged Dusty forward. "Hey!" he shouted, waving his arms. The men turned, startled. Samuel fired his rifle, not to kill, but to scare them away. The sound echoed through the canyon, loud and commanding. The men hesitated, unsure whether to flee or fight. Samuel's presence gave the woman a chance to move, to step back from the attackers. The men decided they were outnumbered and retreated, disappearing into the canyon's shadows. Samuel dismounted quickly and approached the woman, who now looked at him with wide, cautious eyes. She was pale, breathing heavily, and obviously frightened. Her clothes were simple but finely made, and she carried herself with a quiet dignity, even in the midst of fear. "Are you hurt?" Samuel asked gently. He offered her a hand to help her up. She hesitated, then accepted it. I think I am," she whispered. "Thank you. You saved me." Samuel nodded. "You're safe now. What happened?" She looked around nervously, as if afraid the attackers might return. They came for me," she said. "I am Nayeli. They wanted to harm me. I don't know why. I was alone, and then you came." Her voice was quiet, but there was strength in it, the strength of someone who had survived much already. Samuel helped her to a shaded spot under a small cluster of trees. He checked her for injuries. She had a few bruises and scratches, but nothing life-threatening. He tore a piece of cloth from his shirt to bind a cut on her arm, all the while keeping an eye on the canyon, ready in case the men returned. "You're very brave," he said softly, impressed by her calm under fear. "I didn't know what to expect when I heard you, but you fought them off just by staying alive." Nayeli gave a small, wry smile. "It is not bravery," she said, her accent soft but firm. "It is survival. We must survive." There was a pause between them, the quiet only broken by the wind and the distant sound of birds. Samuel realized she had been through more than she let on. He didn't press her further, understanding that some stories needed time before they could be told. Finally, she asked, Where are you taking me?" "I was just going to the ranch," he said. "It's not far from here. You can rest there, and I can help care for your wounds properly." Nayeli studied him for a long moment. Something about his honesty and calm nature made her feel safe. "I will go with you," she said. The ride back was quiet at first. Samuel tried to keep the conversation light, talking about the land, the cattle, and the simple pleasures of ranch life. Nayeli listened, occasionally nodding, occasionally asking questions, though her eyes were alert, constantly scanning the surroundings. Samuel noticed her sharp mind and her careful observation. She was someone who thought before acting, someone who understood danger. By the time they reached Samuel's ranch, the sun was low, painting the sky in deep oranges and purples. The ranch itself was modest but well kept. Samuel's horses whinnied as Dusty returned to the corral, and his few cattle grazed peacefully in the fading light. Samuel led Nayeli to a small guest cabin he kept for travelers or workers who sometimes stayed overnight. "You can rest here," he said. "There is water and a fire if you need warmth." Nayeli nodded, her expression unreadable. "Thank you," she said simply. Samuel went outside to feed Dusty and check the fences, but he could feel her presence in the cabin, a quiet reminder of the day's events. As the evening shadows deepened, he couldn't help but think about how sudden life could change. One moment he was alone, riding through the canyon, and the next he had encountered someone who would forever alter his life. Inside the cabin, Nayeli sat by the window, looking out at the open land. She was silent, thinking about the events of the day, but also about the man who had saved her life. In her culture, a life saved held great significance, and she understood the responsibility that came with it. This was not just gratitude. It was a bond, a connection that could not be ignored. That night, as the stars appeared one by one in the clear desert sky, both Samuel and Nayeli lay awake, each thinking about the other. Samuel thought about her courage, her quiet strength, and the mystery of her life. Nayeli thought about the strange and sudden intervention that had kept her alive, and the man who had become her protector in an instant. Neither of them realized it yet, but their paths were now forever linked. The next morning, Samuel prepared breakfast, and Nayeli joined him. She ate slowly, observing the ranch, asking questions about the work and life here. Samuel answered patiently, impressed by her intelligence and curiosity. They spoke little about the attack, as if by avoiding the details they could start fresh, yet there was an unspoken understanding between them, a recognition that something extraordinary had happened, something that could not be ignored. By the end of that day, Samuel knew that his quiet life had changed forever. He had rescued someone, yes, but he had also met someone who would challenge his views, his ways, and perhaps even his heart. Nayeli, on the other hand, realized that her life was no longer solely her own. She owed her survival to this man, and the traditions of her people demanded more than words of thanks. And so, the first chapter of their lives together began, not with love or understanding, but with survival, respect, and the quiet beginnings of a bond that neither of them could yet fully understand. The Arizona sun set behind the mountains, casting long shadows over the ranch, as both Samuel and Nayeli prepared for the challenges that tomorrow would bring. The morning after her rescue, Nayeli woke early, as was her habit. The soft light of dawn filtered through the small cabin window, painting patterns on the wooden floor. She watched the sun rise over the distant mesas and felt a mixture of relief and unease. She had survived the attack thanks to Samuel McAllister, but the customs of her people weighed heavily on her mind. In Apache tradition, when someone saved a life, it was not just a matter of gratitude. A debt was formed, a bond that could not be ignored. She knew that her words and actions today would determine not only her fate but also Samuel's. She dressed quickly in simple clothing and stepped outside. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of sagebrush and the soft aroma of the horses in the corral. Samuel was already at work, tending to Dusty and feeding the other animals. His movements were calm and deliberate, the same as she had seen yesterday. Yet there was an underlying strength in him that spoke of a life lived in responsibility and solitude. Nayeli watched him for a moment, considering how a single act of bravery could change the course of two lives. Samuel noticed her and waved. "Good morning," he called. "I hope you slept well." "I did," Nayeli replied, her voice soft but steady. "Thank you." Samuel approached, holding a bucket of water for Dusty. "You don't need to thank me. It was the right thing to do." Nayeli hesitated, then looked directly at him. Her dark eyes held a seriousness that made him pause. "In my people's ways, saving a life is not simply a right act," she said quietly. "It is a bond that must be honored." Samuel blinked, unsure of what she meant. "A bond?" he asked, keeping his voice gentle. "I don't understand. Are you saying you are in danger because I helped you?" Nayeli shook her head slowly. "No, the danger has passed. But now, a responsibility exists between us. A life was given, and in my ways, that life creates a promise." Samuel frowned, feeling the weight of her words. He had never known customs like this. In his world, saving someone's life meant helping them, perhaps reporting the danger, but it rarely meant an obligation beyond simple gratitude. Yet he could see the seriousness in Nayeli's eyes. She was not speaking casually. For her, these words carried the force of tradition, honor, and respect. I see," he said slowly, choosing his words carefully. "And what kind of promise is this?" Nayeli took a deep breath. "It is not simple," she said. "It is not a promise you may ignore. You saved my life. Now, I must ask that you stay with me, to protect me, to be part of my life, as my husband." Samuel felt as if the ground beneath him had shifted. He stared at her, trying to process what she had just said. His first reaction was disbelief. He had never been married, never imagined a woman he met in the canyon would demand such a bond from him. Yet, the intensity in her gaze made it clear. This was not a casual request, nor a fleeting thought. Nayeli spoke with the authority of her culture, and he could not dismiss it lightly. I don't know what to say," Samuel admitted, his voice quiet. "I am a simple man, Nayeli. I have lived alone most of my life. I don't know if I can." Nayeli stepped closer, her hands folded in front of her. "You may not understand fully," she said gently, "but this is not meant to frighten you. It is simply the way of my people. Life saved is life honored, and now it is your choice to honor it." Samuel rubbed his forehead, feeling the weight of the situation. He respected her culture, and he felt a sense of duty to the woman who had survived because of him. At the same time, he was a man of reason, a man used to solitude and clear boundaries. Could he accept this bond which, in his world, seemed sudden and unfamiliar? Could he learn to honor it while remaining true to himself? Before he could answer, Nayeli spoke again, her voice calm but firm. "I will not force you," she said, "but understand this. To refuse is to break the honor between us. To accept is to show respect, not just to me, but to the life you saved." Samuel looked at her, seeing courage, wisdom, and determination. He realized that her request was not an act of fear or desperation, but an expression of values he did not yet fully comprehend. He wanted to say no, but he also knew that to refuse her would go against the very instincts that had guided him to help her in the first place. Finally, he spoke, choosing his words with care. I need time to think, Nayeli. I will not abandon you. You are safe here, but this is a serious matter, and I cannot make a decision lightly. Nayeli nodded, accepting his words. She did not push further, knowing that patience was part of understanding. They returned to the cabin where she prepared for the day quietly, and Samuel continued his chores around the ranch. Both were aware of the unspoken tension between them, a bond forming in the silence, growing stronger with each passing hour. Over the next few days, Samuel and Nayeli began to work together, albeit cautiously. She helped with the chores, learning quickly how to care for the animals and maintain the small farm. He taught her gently, showing patience, even when she struggled with tasks unfamiliar to her. The work created an unexpected connection between them, a rhythm that blended their lives even without words. One afternoon, while repairing a fence, Samuel asked, "Tell me about your people, Nayeli. I want to understand." Nayeli paused, brushing the sweat from her forehead. "My people are strong and proud," she said. "We value life, honor, and family. We live close to the land, respecting it because it gives us everything we need, and we respect the bonds between people. When life is saved, it is never forgotten." Samuel listened, absorbing her words. The way she spoke carried dignity and pride. He began to see her not only as a survivor, but as a teacher, someone who could guide him in ways he had never imagined. He realized that this bond, which initially seemed strange and sudden, was rooted in something deeper: respect, trust, and honor. Days passed, and Samuel noticed subtle changes in himself. He found himself thinking about Nayeli more often, wondering how she was, how she had slept, and whether she had eaten enough. He realized that the bond she spoke of was beginning to influence him, even as he struggled to understand it fully. Meanwhile, Nayeli observed him as well, noting his quiet attentiveness and the fairness with which he treated her and the land. She felt the beginnings of trust and, perhaps, a growing admiration. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and painted the sky with streaks of orange and pink, Samuel sat on the porch, watching the fireflies dance over the fields. Nayeli joined him, carrying a small tray with food and water. They shared a simple meal in silence, both lost in thought but comfortable in each other's presence. Finally, Nayeli spoke. "Samuel," she said softly, "I know this is difficult for you. I do not ask lightly, but I want you to know the bond is real. It is not a trick or a demand born of fear. It is life itself, calling for respect." Samuel nodded slowly. "I understand more now, Nayeli. It is not easy for me, but I see that this connection is important. You are right. Life is precious, and what you say carries weight. I will consider it seriously." Nayeli smiled faintly, a mixture of relief and gratitude. She did not press further, knowing that time and shared experience would guide the decision. In the days that followed, Samuel and Nayeli continued their routines, slowly learning from each other. Samuel taught her to ride Dusty properly, how to tend the cattle, and how to maintain the ranch. Nayeli shared her knowledge of the land, the plants, and the traditions of her people. They laughed together at small mistakes, celebrated minor victories, and grew comfortable in each other's company. Yet, beneath the routine, the unspoken promise remained. The bond was there, quietly shaping their interactions, influencing their thoughts, and slowly building a foundation neither could ignore. Samuel felt the responsibility grow heavier, but he also felt a strange sense of honor and connection. Nayeli, for her part, watched him carefully, noting his willingness to listen, to learn, and to respect her ways. One afternoon, a hawk circled above the ranch, its sharp eyes scanning the land. Samuel watched it silently, then turned to Naeli. "You know," he said, "sometimes I think life sends us tests we're not ready for. But maybe, if we pay attention, we can learn from them." Naeli looked at him and nodded. "Yes. And sometimes, it is not just the tests that teach us, but the people we meet along the way." The sun set, casting long shadows over the ranch. Both Samuel and Naeli felt the quiet weight of their unspoken bond, the life-saving moment that had started it, and the uncertain path ahead. They did not yet know what the future held, but they understood that their lives were now intertwined in ways neither could ignore. And so the second chapter of their story unfolded, a story of respect, understanding, and the quiet beginnings of trust, honor, and the complicated promise of a bond neither fully understood, but both could feel. Days turned into weeks on the McAllister Ranch. The bond between Samuel and Naeli grew quietly, like a small stream carving its path through the desert. They worked together each day, tending the land, repairing fences, and caring for the cattle. Samuel found himself noticing little things about Naeli, how she moved with grace, how her eyes observed the world carefully, how she handled even the most difficult chores with patience and skill. Naeli, in turn, noticed Samuel's steady hands, his quiet determination, and the way he treated the land and the animals with respect. Yet despite the peaceful routine, there was tension in the air. Samuel could not forget the words Naeli had spoken, the bond she expected because he had saved her life. Every time he looked at her, he felt a mixture of admiration, respect, and unease. He had always been a man of solitude, comfortable in his own company, and now he was facing a promise that could change his life forever. He wondered whether he could honor it without betraying his own nature. One morning, while Samuel was checking the fences near the edge of the property, Naeli approached him, carrying a small basket of food. "Samuel," she said softly, "may I speak with you?" Samuel set down his tools and wiped the sweat from his brow. "Of course," he replied. He could tell from the tone of her voice that this was important. Naeli took a deep breath. "I do not wish to rush you, but I must be honest. The bond I spoke of is not merely a formality. It is serious. It affects both our lives. I want you to understand fully what it means." Samuel nodded slowly. "I am listening," she continued, her words careful and deliberate. "In my people's ways, when life is saved, the one who saves it becomes part of the life they saved. It is not only protection, it is partnership. A husband is more than a title. He shares life, decisions, responsibilities, and even struggles. This is not meant to frighten you, but to make clear the seriousness of what I ask." Samuel felt the weight of her explanation. It was not simply a tradition. It was a commitment that would shape every aspect of their lives. He admired her honesty and the clarity with which she spoke, but he also felt the immense responsibility pressing down on him. "I am alive." "I understand," he said slowly, "and I respect your ways, Naeli, but I am not a man who has lived with a family or a partnership like this. I have lived alone most of my life. I do not know if I am ready for such a bond." Naeli's eyes softened. "It is not about being ready, Samuel. It is about respect, trust, and courage. Life saved is sacred. You have already shown courage. You have shown respect. Now it is a matter of trust. Trust between us and trust in the promise." Samuel looked down at his hands, feeling torn. He wanted to honor her, to respect her culture, But the idea of marriage, of a lifelong partnership, was foreign to him. He had always relied on himself, and now he was being asked to rely on someone else in a very different way. "I need time," he admitted, his voice quiet. "I cannot make this decision quickly, but I will not abandon you. You are safe here, and I will protect you. That much I promise." Nayeli nodded, her expression calm but firm. "That is enough for now. Time is a friend, Samuel. It will show the path." The days that followed were filled with a mixture of routine and quiet reflection. Samuel noticed that he thought of Nayeli more often than he expected. He caught himself worrying about her when she worked in the fields or when she rode the horses. He found that he sought her opinions, valued her judgment, and respected her knowledge of the land. Nayeli, too, felt her feelings shift. She had approached this bond with seriousness and tradition, but she could not ignore the growing admiration she felt for Samuel. The way he treated others, the way he acted with integrity, and the way he respected her traditions, even when he did not fully understand them. One afternoon, while repairing a broken fence near the edge of the canyon, Samuel heard a familiar sound, a shout, followed by the clatter of horses' hooves. He turned to see two men approaching quickly, their faces grim and determined. Instinctively, he reached for his rifle, his heart pounding. He recognized them from the day he had rescued Nayeli, outlaws who had been searching for trouble, and now they were back. "Stay behind me," Samuel shouted to Nayeli, who had followed him to help. She nodded, moving quickly to a safe position behind a large boulder. Her eyes were sharp, ready, and alert. Samuel felt a surge of respect. She was brave and intelligent, not afraid to face danger alongside him. The men drew their weapons and shouted threats. Samuel took a deep breath, steadying himself. He had faced many challenges on his ranch, but protecting Nayeli added a new urgency. He could not fail. Not now, not ever. "Leave now," he called. "You will not harm anyone here." The men laughed, underestimating Samuel's determination. They advanced, but Samuel was quick, using the terrain and his knowledge of the land to his advantage. He moved swiftly, positioning himself to defend both the ranch and Nayeli. The clash was tense but brief. Samuel's skill and preparation gave him the upper hand, and the men, realizing they could not win, retreated, disappearing once again into the canyon's shadows. Nayeli emerged from behind the rock, her face calm but her eyes burning with intensity. "You are strong, Samuel," she said. "But you cannot do everything alone. We must trust each other." Samuel nodded, feeling the truth in her words. "You are right. I cannot. And I am glad you are here with me. Together, we are stronger." That evening, after the adrenaline had faded and the ranch had returned to its quiet state, Samuel and Nayeli sat outside watching the sunset behind the distant mesas. The events of the day had changed something fundamental between them. The bond she spoke of, the promise, the respect, the tradition, was no longer abstract. It was real. It was tested by danger and survival, and it had proven strong. Nayeli spoke softly. "You see now, Samuel, life saved is never simple. It brings responsibilities, yes, but also trust, courage, and sometimes understanding of something greater than ourselves." Samuel looked at her, realizing that he was beginning to understand. The bond was not a trap or an obligation. It was a connection, forged in the most extreme circumstances, that demanded respect and honor. And in the process, he found himself admiring Nayeli more deeply, not only for her strength and intelligence, but for her wisdom, her patience, and her ability to see the truth of things. Over the next days, Their partnership grew stronger. Samuel continued to teach Nayeli about ranch life, and she continued to teach him about the land, her culture, and her people's traditions. They worked side by side, laughed together at small mistakes, and celebrated minor victories. Yet always, there was an undercurrent of unspoken understanding, a recognition of the bond that connected them and the promise that awaited a full decision. One evening, as the stars appeared one by one in the clear desert sky, Samuel and Nayeli sat quietly, listening to the sounds of the ranch, the soft lowing of the cattle, the gentle rustle of leaves, and the distant cry of a coyote. Samuel finally spoke. "I see now, Nayeli. I understand more than before. This bond, it is serious. It is not easy, but it is honorable, and I want to honor it, even if I do not fully understand everything yet." Nayeli smiled faintly, a mixture of relief and admiration. "That is all I ask, Samuel. That is enough for now. Trust and understanding take time. They cannot be forced." The weeks continued, each day strengthening the connection between them. Samuel found himself thinking not only about the responsibilities the bond demanded, but also about the respect, the partnership, and the courage it inspired in both of them. Nayeli, too, felt her feelings shift from duty and tradition to admiration, respect, and perhaps something more tender, more personal. Their lives were no longer separate. They had faced danger together, learned from each other, and begun to build a foundation of trust and understanding. The bond was no longer a distant promise. It was part of their daily lives, quietly guiding their decisions, their actions, and even their thoughts. And so, as the sun rose over the Arizona plains, Samuel and Nayeli prepared for the days ahead, knowing that challenges would come, but also knowing that together they were stronger. The bond of life saved, tested by danger, and deepened by trust had begun to shape a future neither could have imagined when they first met in that canyon. The following weeks were a mixture of routine, growing trust, and quiet reflection for Samuel and Nayeli. The ranch was peaceful most days, but the memory of the outlaws' attack lingered in their minds. Samuel could feel it like a shadow over the land, and Nayeli's alertness never fully relaxed. Each day they learned more about each other, not just in words, but in actions. Samuel saw Nayeli's intelligence, courage, and skill in handling the ranch, and she saw his strength, patience, and unwavering sense of responsibility. One late afternoon, while Samuel was repairing a section of fence near the edge of the property, a sudden movement in the canyon caught his eye. He tensed, his hand on his rifle. Dusty whinnied nervously, sensing the danger as well. Nayeli, who had been gathering herbs nearby, froze and quickly moved to Samuel's side. "They're back," she whispered, her eyes scanning the rocky terrain. Samuel didn't respond immediately. He watched carefully as 3 men emerged from the canyon, rough-looking, determined, and armed. These were not the same men who had attacked before. They were better organized, more dangerous, and clearly intent on causing trouble. Samuel realized that the quiet life he had hoped for was no longer an option. Protecting Nayeli and himself would require every ounce of skill and courage he had. "Stay behind me," Samuel said, his voice calm but firm. Nayeli nodded, trusting him without question. She had learned that he could handle danger, but she also knew that she had a role to play. She would watch, help, and stand ready. The outlaws advanced, shouting threats. Samuel positioned himself strategically, using the terrain to his advantage. He knew the land better than they did. Dusty shifted nervously, but Samuel's steady presence reassured the horse. The first man raised his weapon, aiming directly at Samuel. Without hesitation, Samuel fired a warning shot, forcing the man to take cover. Nayeli, meanwhile, watched the attackers carefully. She understood their movements, anticipating their next steps. "Samuel, to your left!" she shouted, pointing to a narrow path the outlaws were trying to flank him through. Samuel adjusted quickly, taking cover behind a boulder. The battle was tense, each moment stretching like hours. Samuel's experience with the land and animals gave him an edge. He knew where to move, when to fire, and how to protect both himself and Naeli. The outlaws, despite their numbers, underestimated him. Naeli, using rocks and strategic positioning, helped create obstacles, slowing their progress. Together they formed an unspoken partnership, moving seamlessly, trusting each other completely. Finally, the last of the attackers fled, realizing they could not win. Samuel lowered his rifle, breathing heavily, sweat streaming down his face. Naeli stepped forward, her expression calm but resolute. "You were brave," she said, her voice steady. "But we were strongest because we were together." Samuel looked at her, realizing the truth of her words. They had survived not because of individual skill alone, but because of trust, coordination, and mutual respect. In that moment, the bond she had spoken of, the promise of life saved, became something tangible. It was no longer an abstract idea. It was a living, breathing reality shaped by danger, courage, and reliance on each other. That evening, as the sun set over the desert, Samuel and Naeli sat by the small fire outside the cabin. The air was cool, carrying the scent of sage and the soft rustle of leaves. Both were quiet for a while, absorbing the events of the day. Samuel's thoughts were heavy but clear. He knew that Naeli was right. The bond was real, and it had been tested. "You see now," Naeli said softly, breaking the silence. "Life saved is not only about survival. It is about trust, courage, and partnership. Today, we proved that." Samuel nodded slowly. "Yes, I see, and I respect you, Naeli, more than I can say. You taught me more than I could have learned on my own. About life, about courage, about connection." Naeli's expression softened, a faint smile appearing. "And you taught me too, Samuel. You showed me the strength of your heart, the steadiness of your hands, and the kindness of your spirit. Today, I saw more than a rescuer. I saw a man who could honor the bond between us." The fire crackled softly, casting flickering shadows on their faces. In the quiet of that evening, Samuel felt a shift within himself. He realized that his feelings for Naeli had changed. What had started as duty, respect, and caution was evolving into something deeper, a growing admiration, a connection that touched his heart in ways he had never experienced. Naeli, too, felt her feelings shift. She had approached this bond with seriousness, rooted in tradition and obligation, but she could not ignore the admiration and warmth growing in her heart. Samuel's integrity, courage, and respect for her culture had sparked something she had not expected. In the calm after the storm, she recognized that their connection was no longer simply about tradition. It was about trust, respect, and perhaps something more tender. The following days brought a new rhythm to their lives. Samuel and Naeli continued their work on the ranch, but now there was an unspoken closeness between them. They moved in harmony, anticipating each other's actions, speaking with gestures as much as words. The trust they had built in danger had strengthened their bond in everyday life. Each shared task, each small victory, and even each quiet moment by the fire became a reminder of the partnership they were forming. One evening, Samuel sat on the porch, watching the stars appear in the clear desert sky. Naeli joined him, carrying a small cup of tea. She sat beside him, her hands folded in her lap, and for a moment, they simply watched the sky together. "I never imagined life would lead me here," Samuel said quietly, breaking the silence. "I thought I would live alone forever. But meeting you, Saving you, everything has changed. I feel the weight of this bond, yes, but I also feel respect, trust, and something else I am only beginning to understand. Nayeli looked at him, her eyes soft. And what is that? Samuel hesitated, then spoke slowly. I think, perhaps, it is the beginning of love. I did not know it could grow so quickly, but after what we faced together, I cannot deny it. Nayeli's heart lifted, a mixture of relief and hope filling her. She had not expected this so soon, yet she had felt it too, the admiration, the respect, and the quiet stirring of something more profound. I feel it too, Samuel, she said softly. But we must be patient. Love grows stronger when it is built on trust, respect, and understanding. We have taken the first steps, but the journey is just beginning. The wind rustled through the trees, carrying the scent of the desert and the quiet promise of a future filled with challenges, lessons, and companionship. Samuel reached out and gently took Nayeli's hand in his own. It was a simple gesture, but it spoke volumes: trust, connection, and the recognition of a bond that had been tested and proven. From that day forward, Samuel and Nayeli faced the world together with renewed strength. The outlaws had been a test, and they had survived it not only through skill and courage, but through partnership. Each day, their respect for each other deepened, their trust strengthened, and their feelings grew in quiet, steady ways. The bond of life saved had evolved from a cultural obligation into a genuine connection, one that neither Samuel nor Nayeli could ignore. The Arizona sun continued to rise and set over the vast plains, and the ranch became more than a home. It became a symbol of their shared courage, trust, and the beginning of a life built together. Danger, lessons, and survival had taught them much, but the most important lesson was this: life saved is not only about gratitude, tradition, or obligation. It is about trust, respect, partnership, and the courage to face the world together. And so, as night fell and the stars shone above, Samuel and Nayeli sat side by side, their hands lightly touching, their hearts quietly aligned. They had survived the trials of the day, faced danger, and discovered the true meaning of their bond. The turning point of their story had arrived, and they were ready to step forward into the unknown together, strengthened by trust, respect, and a growing sense of something far deeper than either had imagined. The weeks that followed brought a new rhythm to life on the McAllister Ranch. The bond between Samuel and Nayeli, tested by danger and strengthened by trust, had grown into something undeniable. Each day they worked side by side, sharing tasks, teaching each other skills, and learning more about one another. Yet the question of the bond, the promise of life saved, still lingered quietly between them. Neither had fully spoken the words that might make it official, but both felt it in their hearts. One bright morning, Samuel rode out with Dusty to check on the distant pastures. Nayeli followed on another horse, her long hair catching the sunlight. They rode in silence, enjoying the calm of the open land. Samuel glanced at her, realizing how much he had come to rely on her presence, not just for help, but for companionship, for the comfort she brought to his life. Nayeli, he said finally, his voice gentle, I have been thinking about us, about what you asked after I saved your life. At first I was confused, even afraid. I did not know how to respond. But now I understand. Nayeli turned to him, her expression calm, waiting for him to continue. I see the bond you spoke of, not as a demand, but as a trust. A life saved is a life shared. You have taught me patience, courage, and understanding. And I want to honor that bond fully. I want to share my life with you, Nayeli. For a moment, Nayeli's eyes filled with surprise. Then, slowly, a smile spread across her face, a mixture of relief, happiness, and admiration. "Samuel," she said softly, "you honor me more than words can say. To accept this bond willingly, that is the greatest respect I could hope for. And it is more than a promise, it is a beginning." The two rode back to the ranch, their hearts lighter, yet full of the weight and joy of what they had decided. That afternoon they began preparations, not for a celebration, but for a new way of life together. They worked as a team, repairing old fences, tending the fields, and preparing the cabin to reflect a shared home rather than a place of refuge. Every small task carried meaning. Every shared meal or quiet conversation deepened their connection. Samuel noticed how much he valued Nayeli's opinions. When he faced a decision about the land, he sought her guidance. When an animal fell sick, he trusted her instincts on how to care for it. Nayeli, in turn, saw Samuel not only as a protector, but as a partner, someone whose wisdom and strength could guide them both. Their relationship had grown beyond gratitude or obligation. It had become mutual respect, trust, and the beginnings of love. One evening, as the sky glowed with the colors of sunset, Samuel and Nayeli sat outside the cabin. The soft hum of insects, the distant lowing of cattle, and the rustling of the wind in the trees created a peaceful harmony. Samuel reached out and took Nayeli's hand in his. She did not pull away. Instead, she leaned slightly toward him, their fingers intertwining naturally. "I think," Samuel said quietly, "that life brings people together for reasons we do not always understand. Perhaps it was fate that led me to the canyon that day. Perhaps it was courage, or perhaps it was simply the land that brought us together. But whatever the reason, I am grateful. Grateful for you, for your trust, and for this life we now share." Nayeli's eyes softened. "I feel the same, Samuel. Life brought us together, and we have learned from each other. We have faced danger, shared knowledge, and built trust. Now we step forward, not just as rescuer and saved, but as partners, equal in respect and purpose." The next morning, Samuel invited Nayeli to join him in a simple ceremony. There was no need for grandeur, no large crowd, or elaborate preparations. The bond they had already shared, the promise of life saved, tested by trust and danger, was enough to mark the beginning of their official partnership. They stood on a small rise overlooking the ranch, the land stretching endlessly in front of them, a symbol of the life they would build together. "I promise," Samuel said, his voice steady and heartfelt, "to honor and respect you, Nayeli, to share my life, my home, and my heart with you, to support you, to protect you, and to walk beside you through every challenge, every joy, and every day we have." Nayeli looked into his eyes, her own filled with warmth and determination. "And I promise to honor and respect you, Samuel, to stand beside you, to trust you, and to share my life, my traditions, and my heart with you. Together, we will face whatever comes, as partners, as equals, and as companions." They clasped hands, a simple yet profound gesture that sealed their commitment. The wind carried the soft rustle of the trees, the distant cry of a hawk, and the quiet approval of the land around them. In that moment, nothing else mattered. The bond, once a matter of obligation, had grown into mutual love and respect. They were no longer simply rescuer and saved. They were husband and wife, partners in life and heart. In the days that followed, Samuel and Nayeli settled into a life of partnership. The ranch flourished under their combined care. Samuel's knowledge of the land and livestock, paired with Nayeli's understanding of nature and her people's traditions, created a harmonious balance. They faced the usual challenges of ranch life, storms, unpredictable cattle, and the occasional wanderer, but together they met every difficulty with cooperation and trust. Their evenings were filled with quiet conversations, laughter, and shared meals. They learned the small details of each other's habits, preferences, and dreams. Samuel taught Nayeli how to mend fences with precision, how to ride across rough terrain, and how to track cattle. Nayeli shared knowledge of herbs, plants, and the ways of the land she had learned from her people. Each day brought new lessons, new moments of understanding, and a growing sense of companionship. Neighbors began to notice the change as well. Samuel, once solitary and reserved, now welcomed visitors and shared stories of the land. Nayeli, once cautious and private, greeted them with calm confidence and warmth. Together they became a respected presence in the area, a symbol of trust, courage, and partnership. One evening, after a long day of work, Samuel and Nayeli sat outside, watching the stars appear one by one in the clear desert sky. Samuel reached for Nayeli's hand again, holding it gently. "I never imagined life could be like this," he said softly. "Danger, trust, learning, and now love, all of it has led me here to you." Nayeli smiled, leaning slightly toward him, "And I never imagined that the bond of tradition could grow into something so much more. We have faced fear, challenge, and the unknown, and through it all we have found each other." The two sat in silence for a while, letting the calm of the desert and the quiet strength of their partnership fill the space between them. They were no longer defined by the danger of the past, the uncertainty of the present, or the challenges of the land. They were defined by trust, respect, and love, by a life they had chosen to build together. Months passed, and the seasons began to change. The ranch thrived under their care. Samuel and Nayeli faced storms, difficult repairs, and the unpredictability of the land. But each challenge brought them closer together. They learned to rely on one another completely, not out of obligation, but out of choice and love. One evening, as the sun set behind the distant mesas, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold, Samuel and Nayeli walked through the fields together. Dusty and the other horses followed, grazing peacefully. Samuel took Nayeli's hand, squeezing it gently. "I am grateful for you," he said, "for your trust, your courage, and your presence. I cannot imagine life without you now." Nayeli looked at him, her eyes shining. "And I am grateful for you, Samuel, for your strength, your wisdom, and your willingness to honor our bond. Together, we are stronger than we could ever be alone." The land stretched endlessly around them, a symbol of freedom, strength, and possibility. Samuel and Nayeli stood together, side by side, hearts aligned, and lives intertwined. The bond that had begun with a rescue, tested by danger and strengthened by trust, had grown into a life built on love, respect, and partnership. As night fell, the stars appeared once more, brilliant and countless, reflecting the infinite possibilities of the future. Samuel and Nayeli returned to the cabin, hand in hand, ready to face whatever challenges and joys awaited them. They had survived danger, honored tradition, and discovered the power of trust and love. Their story, once uncertain and filled with tension, had become a tale of courage, partnership, and the triumph of human connection. And so, on the McAllister Ranch, under the wide Arizona sky, Samuel and Nayeli began their life together, not as rescuer and saved, not as strangers bound by tradition, but as partners, husband and wife, ready to face the world side by side, with hearts united and a future full of hope.